Hello, welcome. So we're doing test two, and please recall that I'm going to practice a balance with you. I'm just going to go over a handful of them that I'm not quite, or I'm not certain about how easily they could be found in the argumentative assignments. Conversely, those that I do believe are easily found in those assignments, I'm not going to voluntarily go over, this being your second test. Nevertheless, if you have specific questions on a specific question, I will not ever turn you down. All right. And so keep that in mind. Hopefully you've had some time to look ahead of time to see if you have any questions on a particular question as far as that which is being asked, etc. All right. So let's see here. Pardon me. I go through the names. All right. Believe I have all of you. So happy to have you. So let's take a look at test two. Please remember you do not have unlimited submissions on the second test, okay? Test one you do, but not with test two, all right? Notice how I have things a little bit, I have things topsy-turvy on option C with number one. British plans to placate colonial tensions in granting Native American lands to the colonies. According to the common narrative found in the War for Independence, oftentimes it's the opposite, right? It's a desire to placate the Native Americans and to thus keep the American British subjects from moving westwardly into trans-Appalachian territory. And so that was oftentimes cited as a cause of friction, hence the proclamation of 1763, right? And so the other factors are mentioned in the introduction to that assignment. Again, the salutary neglect thesis, right? That we were largely neglected by British policies that were not enforced, and it had a healthy effect upon us as our assemblies accumulated powers, and we smuggled and did as we pleased economically. And then the British tried to crack down on us at the end of the French and Indian War. It's a very common thesis found in the textbook as well. Bernard Bailyn has court history. And remember, that's like ideological causation, the idea that we were born on lofty ideals, on the Enlightenment, the Scottish Enlightenment, the Great Awakening, okay? And I want you to be familiar with some of those basic tenets found within them. So remember the Enlightenment, you get a lot of mention in macro coverage of the Enlightenment on the social contract, natural rights, checks and balances, right, with Montesquieu's writings. With the Scottish Enlightenment, you have a lot of libertarianism, that man can't be trusted with too much power. And with the Great Awakening, you have mention of the of conditional deference, right? That if your leaders are not following God's precepts, you have the right to engage in pretty much civil disobedience, right? You have the blessing of God to follow or to rebel against an established authoritative figure who is not following God's precepts, etc. All right, and so all that's mentioned in the handout. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna move down and see what else. Let's see here. Joseph Ellis, remember he is mentioned on number 3 of the War for Independence handout. And so recall what he said about how he depicted George Washington. Remember I said that I called it kind of mildly revisionist. So take a look at that. Howard Zinn's was very heavily revisionist. Remember his demagogue thesis and scapegoat thesis. So recall that. Alan Brinkley, I've already mentioned it, his thesis in his introduction on this topic, but go ahead and take a look at that in your books, okay? Especially with test 2 and 3. I encourage you to find your own answers from the textbook, okay? Because I'm assuming hopefully that you have acquired your book by now. Please remember also by the 15th, when you do test 2 of this month, please be sure that you have done the first 3 quizzes, the textbook quizzes, okay? They're pretty cut and dry. So let's see here. And then numbers 10 and 11 apply to numbers 1 and 2 in the Confederation assignment. Literally, number 10 applies to the thesis of number 1, and number 11 applies to the thesis of number 2. And we talked about that. Just recall, take a look at the assignment. Again, I'll give you an opportunity to ask me questions in a moment. But I think that you're all right there. Number 12 could be found in number 1 of that said assignment on turning to a republic. Number 12, state level governments, and the argument that they were rather liberal and revolutionary and enlightened. The type of government devised, I don't know if I've have overtly stated that, but you could infer it from the constitutional assignment is the last option. We have technically a constitutional, right? The Constitution is the ultimate rule, ultimate sovereign authority. Technically, the people are by giving their consent to the Constitution, right? So foundationally, the people, with popular notion of popular sovereignty, are sovereign, but they have given their sovereign approval to the ultimate authority of a constitution, a written constitution. The federal part is a balance between state and local powers and autonomy and the central government's power. In a republic, I just stick with the simplistic definition of Aristotle. It has elements of democracy, of rule by the demos, the common people. It has elements of rule of an aristocracy or a so-called best group, like with the Supreme Court, et cetera, handpicked people for life and cabinet members, et cetera. And it has elements of a monarchy, a chief executive with significant powers. So that's what we're looking at with number 13. Looking at the great man history of the early republic, you could easily infer number 14. Was it truly ever laissez-faire right from the get-go with Secretary of Treasury Alexander Hamilton? Remember, laissez-faire is government let it be, stays out of the capitalist economy. Is that the case as you read in number 1? Okay. And then number 15, I like to believe I've mentioned that, but I'm not sure if it's overtly stated in the argumentative assignments. And I would take a long, hard look at A, at the very first option. We're defined as a philosophical, logical, historical defense of the need for a republic more centralized and less democratic than the Confederacy, right? In case I didn't make that clear. That which is not enlightened, that which is not conservative, I'd like to think as much wiggle room as there is that you could infer that those two. Remember, the conservatives, they still wanted checks and balances. They still wanted a constitutional federal republic. They just felt like some people are better equipped to rule than others, right? And I remember I gave you the rhetorical question: do you believe everyone's equally capable of fixing your car or writing an English paper for you, et cetera? The anti-federalists, right, became the Democratic Republicans. So they actually were libertarian. They didn't oppose libertarianism. 20 and 21 are a bit redundant. They come right out of number 1 of the great man history of the early republic. And I think relatively that they're pretty easy, as does number 22 and 23. All should come from number 1 of great man history of the early republic. Number 24 applies to number 2, the defense, McCullough's court history of John Adams, right? Remember, he defends him as to why he failed to attain re-election, and he actually gives a positive bent to it. The Alien and Sedition Acts are described in there on number 2. All right. Remember, Hofstadter's thesis is the mommy and daddy thesis that applies to number 3 of the great man history of the early republic. So remember the childhood psychology thesis about Jefferson with his mom and dad and their different stations in the socioeconomic pyramid and how it psychologically affected him to become a person who would identify with the common people by the time he became president. Ironies of Jefferson's rule come from number 4 of the great man history of the early republic. So remember the thesis with number 4, right? We talked about that, is that the contradiction, right, between what he practiced and what he preached. And then there is instance after instance on number 4 of your argumentative assignment. But note, it doesn't say that he just changed with age and became more conservative, or that he changed with power, or just simply call him a hypocrite, etc. Right? But it contends, right? It really highlights the very unconfrontational facet to Jefferson's personality. And when he felt like forces bigger than himself were going against him, he changed, he folded, he went with them. He became a pragmatist instead of an idealist, and in situation by situation. All right. So 28 follows the textbook. 29 is mentioned on number 4 of the early Republic assignment, as is number 30 is found in number 4 of that assignment. Alan Brinkley, take a look at the chapter on Thomas Jefferson. I want to say it's chapter 7, but I don't recall precisely. But there's a chapter just on the Jeffersonian era in your textbook, and just you can derive the answer from the introduction and see if he adheres to that same thesis as number 4 on my argumentative assignment. All right, the War of 1812. Okay, this is kind of a gimme one. Who did we fight against? So recall, remember this is your only video assignment. And so did we fight the French? Right, so that one's pretty easy. 33 is easy in light of the video. All right, and 34 and 35 come right out of the documentary. So I'm here for the next few minutes if you have any specific questions, but I feel as if I have covered anything that may have proverbially fallen through the cracks, right, for test 2. I feel like everything else is pretty overtly found in your argumentative assignments. And this being test 2, I just don't want to give as much, to be honest, having taken one test already for me, okay? But nevertheless, I want to be fair, and if something is not as obvious as I think it is, I mean, because I write these tests, so it's subjective. I have my own quirky style of writing the questions, etc. So maybe something's not clear that isn't apparent to me. So now's your opportunity. No pressure, but does anyone have any questions on a specific question? Mr. Virog, no? Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay.
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay, good. Good. Anybody else? Anybody else? Kaleo, Michael, Nabil? Feel free to speak up. Okay, guys, I mean, to be honest, this is pretty typical for my class on tests 2 and 3, especially 2. It usually just takes me about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, because I usually feel like they're only about 4 or 5. And I think I gave a few more than that in this instance that may not be clearly found in the argumentative assignments. And then and I'm usually done. All right, so you guys will get your credit. As you see here, you have 35 questions. You get the last 15 to make it an even 50, and that's your curve. And then I will add 5 to 10 points to that 15-point curve for the 4 of you. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Good luck on the test. Okay. I
Thank
noticed
you.
that the War of 1812 assignment is not quite due yet. So we're rather ahead of schedule. So stay tuned to your announcements, okay? Because chances are for at least one, if not even two regularly scheduled Zoom days, I may cancel because like I said, we're ahead of schedule.
Mhm. So this Thursday is a holiday. We are not
Yes.
having, right?
So we will not. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
We're
great.
ahead of schedule and it's a holiday. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr. Virak.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, good luck, you guys. All right. Do
Thank you.
well and have a great rest of your week. Okay.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't forget about your quizzes.
Yeah, I won't.
Quick question before you head out.
Yes.
I was doing errands, so it was hard for me to, try to do both tasks of, pay attention. How soon do you think you'll be able to post this on YouTube?
To be
If you're
honest,
going to.
it'll probably be this evening, Michael.
Okay.
Because yeah, I'm embarrassed to admit it, but as a Generation Xer, I have a hard time technologically, maneuvering this stuff. And so when my wife gets done with her job, she helps me.
Okay. Sounds good. Understandable.
All right, but I should be able to have it up by tonight, though. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. That's perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Professor.
You're welcome. Appreciate you. Thank you, Michael.
You have a good one.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Bye, everyone.